All right, I'm just going to say it. Drop Dead Fred is a trickster god. I know. Drop Dead Fred was one of my favorite movies growing up. I loved that movie. We used to rent it on VHS and watch it all the time. But you know, movies hit a lot different at 5 or 6 than they hit at 30. All of my siblings now have a completely different opinion on this. Anyway, my husband had never seen it. So I told him he's got to watch it. You are in for a surprise. You are going to love this movie. I'd planned to show it to our children. Social baby, got a little baby here. When they got older, I'm like, you're going to love this movie. This is going to go on the list of our Sunday movies. I figure it's going to be another Kindergarten Cop, which he also hadn't seen. Easy win for me. Right? Drop Dead Fred is the biggest movie L I have ever taken. You know what a movie L is? You show someone a movie that you swear is good and they hate it and you hate it, so you can't even defend it. That was Drop Dead Fred. It's so bad. Like, where are all these good memories coming from? I don't know. Spoiler alert. This movie came out in 1991, so if you haven't seen it by now, that's on you. The log line. The quick summary for this movie is a 25-year-old woman's life goes downhill, so she moves back in with her domineering mother and reconnects with her childhood imaginary friend, Drop Dead Fred. Drop Dead Fred is played by British comedian Rick Mayall. Rick Mayall. And the lead, Liz, she is played by Phoebe Cates. You may actually recognize her from Gremlins, which is a much better movie. Which does hold up. Anyway. Now, the concept is fantastic. But the execution. Wow, the execution is so bad. I'm not even going to talk about the horrible CGI because it's 1991. I'm going to cut them some slack. I'll just discuss the contents and the scenes. I asked halfway through if this was a horror movie, but it's not listed as a horror movie. It's listed as a comedy. And I'm thinking, who is this movie for? It's too grown for children and it's too juvenile for adults. Who's watching this movie? In the movie, Fred starts by smearing dog shit all over the mom's freshly washed carpet. He sinks Liz's best friend's houseboat, and he causes Liz to physically attack a mall violinist, which is a felony, by the way. This is among many other things that Fred causes Liz to do. So we're going to flash back to childhood. We're going to get a little bit more information on this. And we see that Liz often destroys the house. He got her father arrested. He put mud all over the table. And every single time, Drop Dead Fred leaves Liz to take the blame. Fred could easily prove that he is real when Liz gets into trouble by just moving something, but he never does. What kind of friend is this? Imaginary or not? Also, in childhood, Liz and Fred fantasize about cutting off her mother's head and eating it. I guess it goes a little too far. Also, one of Fred's antics in her childhood causes her father to leave. Liz's father is terrible, by the way. He's just awful. He just walks out on his family, his wife and child, over a small argument. Just you throw this whole man in the trash. Why are we putting up with this? But somehow, Liz's mother gets all the blame for this. Now, Liz's mother is cold. She's definitely cold. But she was there for her. In 1991 logic, the mother is always wrong. The misogyny of this movie is completely off the charts. Liz's mother is a monster because she's constantly irritated by her daughter, who is seeking to destroy her life. So she's not supposed to be irritated by her, I guess. I never saw one sign of neglect or physical abuse. If I got my mom's boyfriend arrested, there would be a severe whipping for me, followed by probably a very cold week or month or year from my mother. I'm really on the mom side here. I don't care. I'm sorry. I'm on the mom side. But Liz was the problem from jump. People have this idea that parents never regret having children, that kids are just little angels, and that's not true. I'm sorry. That's just not true. Plenty of people regret having children. The problem is you don't know if you're going to regret or which ones you're going to regret until it's all said and done. So might as well try. The rate of parental neglect is somewhere around 7% in the US, and it might be higher depending on how you phrase the question. So there are countries where it's 11 to 14%. Or just you know what? I wish I hadn't. Not you, little man. Other children. The idea that children deserve unconditional love and support no matter what destructive behavior they indulge in is just nuts. Just look around at our collapsing society, because that is where this idea gets you. It gets you a girl punching their teacher in the face because he took away her cell phone. That's where that gets you. No, children do not deserve perpetual indulgence. Liz was a bad little girl. She was bad. Oh, and if something goes wrong, it's the mom's fault. But dad just walked out on the family. Well, must have been the mom's fault. But the daughter has severe mental illness. Well, that must be the mother's fault. But a trickster god is terrorizing the household. Also, the mother's fault. Always the mother. The sexism, the misogyny, it's insane. Now, Drop Dead Fred is supposed to support Liz in the face of her emotionally abusive mother. Abusive. But who is supporting her in the face of her absentee father who walked out on the family? Oh, well, dads are supposed to leave, silly. They're just men. That's what they do. What? That's insane. This movie is insane. I'm sitting there watching it, mouth open, like, what was I being fed as a child? Oh my God. I'm not going to sit here and say that Liz's mother is perfect. She is not perfect. She definitely had issues of her own, but her issues were really nothing compared to most mothers in this country. If you want to see a bad mom, check out Soft White Underbelly. Check out Soft White Underbelly. You'll see mothers who pimp their kids for drugs. Or better yet, have you ever had a friend who, has a child, but then they get a new boyfriend and they just invite the new boyfriend in the home, and the new boyfriend doesn't care about the child whatsoever, may even abuse the child? Or how about mothers who drink too much? In what kind of idealized Hollywood world is a mother supposed to have zero flaws? Liz's mother is not perfect. I'm not saying she is perfect, but why is it a crime for a woman to not be perfect? I guess it's 1991. It's a crime for a woman to not be absolutely perfect. She did love her daughter, and she was there for her daughter after the divorce. Now, if you want to make a real movie, where is the Drop Dead Fred for Casey Anthony? I gotta move off this topic. I just can't with the misogyny in this movie. Everyone wants to hate the mother. They want to hate the mother. No matter what goes wrong, it's always the mother's fault. Now, moving on. Drop Dead Fred is there for Liz in two ways. First, he lets Liz know that someone loves him no matter what. And that no matter what is usually after the trouble that he has caused. And two, he shows Liz that her husband is a cheat. Now, Liz leaves her husband and she gets with her childhood friend. So Fred is not all bad. I will admit Fred is not completely 100% bad. But trickster gods aren't usually all bad. They usually have something good to them as well. It's at the end of the movie, when she gets with her childhood friend, that we see that his daughter is actually now imaginary friends with Drop Dead Fred. Or Drop Dead Fred is imaginary friends with her. And Liz can no longer see him because she's happy and she's well adjusted. And this is when the little girl and Drop Dead Fred trap the babysitter in an upside down hanging trap like you would an animal, which is also a felony, by the way. Drop Dead Fred is just committing felony after felony after felony. Now, there are two interpretations of this movie. One is that Liz has a mental illness and Fred is her Tyler Durden. This is a Fight Club reference. You should have seen it by now. My smart brother said this, the smartest one, and I appreciate him. And although I appreciate him, it's just not true because the little girl at the end saw him too. Now you could say Fred represents mental illness and this little girl is also mentally ill. But do you remember the scene in the psychiatrist's office where Fred sees his other imaginary friend buddies? So this theory cannot be true. There is a universe with these imaginary friends and they intervene to make friends with these vulnerable children. Sound familiar? Sound familiar. Now, the other interpretation. I am not taking this movie too seriously. I am not. The other interpretation, which my other brother agreed with, is that Fred is some kind of djinn. He said Drop Dead Fred is a trickster god. And on this, he is correct, which is very rare for that brother. I love that brother, but this is rare for him. My sister, however, she liked the movie, and I will always question her judgment after this. There will not be one moment where I do not question her judgment. Now, on this channel, we have talks about mind viruses and that they infect weaker minds like viruses infect weaker immune system. And this is kind of like that, but Fred is real. He's not the accumulation of group fears like a tulpa. Remember that? We talked about that in the Watiko video. And he is an entity which exists on another plane, and he can manipulate this plane. So he's actually a pretty powerful entity. Now, I agree that it's very important for childhood Liz to feel love, but not all love is good love, and not all attention is good attention. Fred leaves Liz to take the fall for all of their destructive actions, and it makes her mother even angrier with her, which poisons the relationship even more. The stress tears apart her parents' marriage, which leaves Liz without a father and no one to deflect from her mother's negative emotions. So he leaves Liz alone. That's not cool. Also, Fred attacks other adults in the neighborhood. Like we talked about the babysitter, getting her in that trap. Let's see if I can find a picture. But he also throws paint on somebody's grandmother. Like, that's just awful. So this is only going to isolate Liz even more. She'll become a social pariah because seriously, who wants to let your kid hang out with a child like this? They're going to destroy your house and they're going to throw paint on your mother. No, thank you. You go play somewhere else or with nobody at all. You're none of my business. Just get away from my house, kid. Basically, very basically, Fred is putting Liz on the road to fentanyl. However, I will give Fred the benefit of the doubt that he would have tortured any of Liz's no good boyfriends in her teenage years, and fingers crossed he would not have let her get involved in pornography. So that's good. That's why I say he's not all bad. So maybe he was just grooming her to be a supervillain. Maybe he means well and he just can't fathom that people get turned off by you sinking their house. The houseboat scene, which is so atrocious. Like, it's so rude. Have you seen that movie, Daniel Isn't Real? This is a young man and he goes through this terrible tragedy. And so he kind of resurrects his childhood friend, his childhood imaginary friend. And the story ends in grief. But that's a horror movie. That's what Drop Dead Fred would be if it were a horror movie. And Drop Dead Fred really should be a horror movie because you're looking at it like, who is this for? Who is this movie for? Siskel and Ebert both said Drop Dead Fred is among the worst movies that they have ever seen. And I used to love it. When I was a kid, I used to love it. But now that I've rewatched it as an adult, I completely agree with them. Where is my mom? And why did she let me watch this movie? Now I'm questioning her. May she rest in peace. And she and my sister can get this side eye because what were you thinking? So you let me know in the comments. Do you think Drop Dead Fred is a djinn, some kind of trickster god oblivious to his own destruction? Or are you wrong? Let me know.